which is going to be an issue very soon when donors start pulling out. And actually, I think it's going to be a particular issue for organisations working on gender and women's rights, because there's one donor, HIVOS, which is the Dutch fund, who have already announced that they're pulling out of Kyrgyzstan, and they fund a huge amount of work on gender and women's rights in Kyrgyzstan. So I think it'll be very interesting how that affects this sector once they do pull out. Again, these groups, sort of more marginalised alternative groups, are, on the one hand, particularly vulnerable to, will be particularly vulnerable when the donors withdraw, because at the moment they are entirely respondent on donor money, and don't really see any they don't really see any possibility of, for instance, being able to access money from the state, which perhaps more traditional, maybe service provider, women's NGOs might be able to do. For instance, they're running a shelter for victims of domestic violence or something like that, be able to access funding to cover that. But, you know, an organisation campaigning on lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender rights at the moment does not feel it's in any position to obtain money from the state. And this was also the case for this organisation working with HIV positive people. You know, she said, what could we do without the support of donors? We could give consultations, that sort of thing, but in terms of material help, we wouldn't be able to do anything. And I think that's certainly true, but on the other hand, what was interesting talking to people working in these and active in these more marginalised groups is because they had a very, very, very strong sort of community base, they were very, very rooted in the communities that they worked in. They felt that even if the donors were to withdraw tomorrow and they were suddenly left penniless, that they would still survive because of the commitment and dedication of their members. And one of my respondents said, you know, activism's free. You know, it just takes up people's time, but, you know, if people are committed and dedicated to it, then they'll do it, whether they're paid or not. And so I think that's quite an interesting sort of paradox, really, and it may be that it's actually more mainstream groups that really suffer, even when the donors pull out. Okay, generational issues. Oh, can't see that picture at all. Anyway, that's a lovely picture of a recent event to mark the 30th anniversary of CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And it shows serried ranks of elderly and middle-aged ladies sitting here, and then a few younger people and about 3 men in the crowd there, which I was going to use to illustrate that that's slightly better. The mid to late 90s, as I said, saw the establishment of a huge number, well, not a huge number, but a great deal of NGOs working on women's rights and gender issues. And the women who founded those organisations are still very much in charge. And this is, I think, going to be quite a significant challenge in the very near future in terms of the development of the sector, I guess. On the one hand, the people that I've spoken to have been sort of very aware of the women who came before them and the role that they played in sort of establishing the women's movement. I mean, this person had a very personal attachment, but other people talked about how aware they were and how respectful they were of these women who'd come before them. But at the same time, this is really leading to a feeling of frustration amongst many commentators, particularly sort of the gender advisors that I spoke to, gender experts. I really felt this was leading to stagnation and a lack of development. And this wonderful quote, "We need fresh blood," this person said. And sort of the two reasons that were given for this was partly that in the 90s there was a huge investment made on the part of donors in building the capacity of civil society actors generally, and obviously that included a lot of women's organisations and women's leaders. and that money has just completely run out, and there's no investment being made in the younger generation. But the other issue is, of course, age hierarchies, which are as strong in NGOs as they are in other institutions. And this is a quote from the head of this lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender rights organisation, who said that she felt that their age was as much a disadvantage for them as what they worked on in terms of being marginalised and not being heard. So she said, so our age is a disadvantage for us as activists because we're not considered to be serious enough. They don't have to consider anything that we say as serious because we're so young. Okay, in terms of motivations, personal experience has emerged as a very important factor in many people's decisions to become active in gender and women's rights organisations, either having suffered themselves or having witnessed at first hand other people suffering discrimination and violence in particular. And this was particularly the case, as you might expect, from respondents who were involved in groups that had a direct link to a particular community, or who were involved in work on violence against women. So this person will go and work for this LGBT organisation. I want young people not to be afraid of who they are, to feel that they're completely alone, like I felt at that age. So that's why she was active in this organisation. And particularly for these people who had sort of very personal reasons for coming to work in these organisations, they'd often come in initially as volunteers and then gone on to take on permanent paid work, which, I don't know, there's a lot of literature on civil society professionals, a lot of which sort of is very damning about people's motivations for working for NGOs. You know, it's all about money and status and access to resources, but I think this maybe tells a bit of a different story. I'm not sure. Another reason was altruism, people wanting to do good. Again, often as a result of having witnessed, in this case, people's pains and sufferings. And this had prompted her to decide that she wanted to do good. But this is quite interesting. Sorry, it's a very long quote, but this particular respondent and others that I've spoken to, this idea of wanting to do good was very, very closely linked to having a very, very definite idea about how society should be developing, and sort of very normative ideas about what was good and what was not good. And this person saw a direct link between sort of, as she saw it, Kyrgyz society sort of becoming more and more closed, and sort of the status of the Kyrgyz nation as a result in terms of human development, and saw that as being very closely linked to working on women's rights. And then another sort of strong motivation was sort of almost a sense of responsibility